Good evening. Welcome to Fish Hawk Live and the Great Lakes Fishing Podcast. Joining us tonight is Captain Marc Kulak from King's Landing Sport Fishing. Captain Marc, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. You are a guy out of the Toronto area. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your charter.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm located just outside Toronto where I live, and I guide out of Bluffers Park Marina in Toronto, Canada. I've been fishing my whole life. I actually grew up in England fishing with my dad on the North Sea for cod and mackerel. And then, in my early teens, we moved to Toronto, and my dad had me fishing out of Bluffers. And I've been fishing that water pretty much the last 30 years. What I'd say over the last little while, as I started fishing on my own, I started to evolve and really work across the lake. So when I had my own smaller trailable boat, I would fish anywhere from Toronto to St. Catharines, and I'd really, call it follow the fish as they would migrate around the lake. But also, in addition to fishing in Toronto, back in 2012, I had the opportunity to move out to the west coast of Canada. So I also spent 3 years fishing on the Pacific Ocean in Vancouver, and really picked up a bunch of different tactics there. And then came back home, as they say it, in 2015. And that's really when, got serious about wanting to fish more on Lake Ontario and out of Toronto, and picked up the vessel I have now. It's a 27 Tiara Open that was completely redone from top to bottom, and set up King's Landing Sport Fishing with my father, and now I run it out of Bluffers Park in Toronto. So pretty excited to be here today.
So you've done a lot of fishing. You've fished the North Sea. You fished the West Coast. And what is it? I mean, you spent a lot of time in Toronto. You said you fished that whole north side of Lake Ontario. What is it about Bluffers Point or Bluffers Park, Bluffers? What is so special about that area? Why did you decide to call that home?
Yeah, you know what? I love the water in front of Toronto. It's got quite the reputation for a section of the water that's called the drop or the ledge, and it's really where we get this incredible transition where the water goes from a depth of 60 feet to, call it 160 feet in a matter of seconds. If you're someone that doesn't know the water and you're doing a north-south troll, probably more if you're doing a north troll and you've got your riggers down deep or your divers down deep, it can get really messy fast. But that ledge, it brings the bait in, it brings the fish in, and magic happens. And the Bluffs has just had a reputation for having the fish due to the drop. And, for many years, when it comes to our large derbies that we have in Toronto, the Bluffs has produced a lot of those large fish. In addition to that, the Bluffs has a couple of the largest tournaments, on the Canadian side of the Great Lakes. That's the King of Kings tournament run by Vito Cerrone. A lot of the American captains will come join us for that tournament. And it's all based out of the Bluffs. So I'd say that's a big part of the Bluffs. Honestly, for me, my dad loved the Bluffs, and he would refuse to fish anywhere else. So that's probably why I got so loyal to the Bluffs. I have ventured across to other ports. I've got lots of friends at other ports, and there's tons of great places to fish on the Canadian side of the Great Lakes. But I'm partial to Bluffers now. I got lots of buddies both on the charter captain side or the recreational side out of Bluffers, and it's just home for me when it comes to fishing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. I was actually able to fish out of that port, I believe, about 3 years ago, and it makes for some great photography as well. A lot of cool sights to see with the bluffs and also with the city skyline in the background.
Yeah, and that's the other cool. That's exactly it. To your point, like it's anyone that's been at Bluffs when they've come from the land, you're driving. For me, I'm driving across one of the major highways in the Greater Toronto area, and then I drive through part of Toronto, and I get to this top of this hill, and then I drive down this big steep hill to the marina, and it's like an oasis away from everything. You leave all your problems at the top, and you're just at this beautiful oasis.
Folks, if you're watching, feel free to drop in a question. So the question of the night will get a free Fish Hawk swag bag. We're going to throw in a hat, some stickers, whatever else the guys have to throw in the box. And don't worry if you're from Toronto or you're from the Canadian side of the border. We have no problem with shipping up there. So feel free to fire away with questions no matter where you're from. We'll go ahead and send that out if you are the winner tonight. So ask some great questions. Captain Marc is extremely knowledgeable. He's got a really cool YouTube channel as well. It's been something that I've been checking out this week just to kind of get an idea of who you are and what you're about. Marc, tell us a little bit about that YouTube channel, what you got going on there.
Yeah, it was a neat project I started this winter, with the environment we're in right now in COVID. We're all looking for things to do. And I have a couple of good buddies of mine that they're not fishermen. Like, they come out with me once or twice a year for fun, but they're not fishermen. But I've got two buddies that actually are very, very active in the YouTube space, running very popular channels in the computer gaming space, and far more popular than my fishing channel is today. But we started talking sometime, and they said, Marc, you've got this passion for fishing. You love doing it. You're the guy that's willing to help anybody at the dock or share your knowledge. Like, why don't you set up the channel? And it got me thinking, like, none of us were born knowing what we know today about fishing. We've learned from different people. So, that's really how it got started. It was, how could I share this knowledge with others? In society today, the whole sharing community is a big thing. So it was my way of giving back and sharing with other people. And it's been really rewarding. Like, I get lots of comments, both public and private, from people. I get people that find me and start sending me text messages because of the YouTube channel, and really appreciating the sharing of the knowledge. And that's what I find so awesome about YouTube. And it's my way of giving back, because if I think about the 30 plus years I've been fishing Lake Ontario, I've had a ton of people that have shared information with me, and it's a way of giving back.
Yeah, it's very good. One of my favorite videos in there, and it's something that I've been seeing a lot this year. I think it's because there are a lot more people jumping into the sport, taking maybe that boat that they've fished inland waters and deciding, hey, we're going to go out and give it a shot in the Great Lakes this year. One of the things that I've seen a lot online, and you address it on your channel, is fishing with meat. So can you tell us a little bit about how you rig your meat, how you prepare it, how you do it? It's like something that you do quite a bit of.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'd say, myself and, a lot of people that fish out of the Toronto area, we're big meat fishermen. I'll start by saying, I'll actually start without meat first and say, from a spoon perspective, for me, like, I'll probably run spoons, early June into, early part of July will be a predominantly spoon program. And then once that middle of July comes, I really start putting a lot of meat in the program. I still have some spoons out there, on some of my junk lines on my lead cores, but I really do flip into the meat. So for me, a couple of things. I'll really run, when it comes to meat strips, I'll run two types of fish. I'm either running herring that I get from the West Coast. A friend of mine, Mike from Underdog, he brings it in, and I get it from Mike. Or I won't be afraid to use an old-fashioned sabiki rig and try and jig up some alewives. And, I'll strip those alewives. I don't buy my own strips. I strip the fish myself. And, I've shared some videos on how to do that. But then, I brine those strips. You probably see in the background here, I got a whole bunch of the Potskis fire brine. I like to brine my meat strips in the Potskis. And then for me, it's a couple of different ways I run the meat. I run a combination of, whether it be the clean rigs, where I've got that meat strip with no Twinkie flies. I mentioned earlier, like, I fished in Vancouver a bunch for 3 years, and out there, while you don't see too much strip bait use, you see people that use whole anchovy in an anchovy head, similar to this fake one here, but a real one. But what you'll find what I found when I fished out west, is all of the rigs, they'd be clean or naked, no Twinkie flies. So I'll use I'll often find that when the fish feel a bit more spooky later in the day, I'm running that rig super clean, longer leader, 7-8 feet leader, because I want them focusing on just that meat rig, that strip. But what I find in the morning, especially when the fish are feeding and really aggressive, or around the major or the minor bite time, that's where I'll start to run. If I grab a rig here, that's where I'll be running. I'll be running a Kingfisher larger paddle, but I'll have the Twinkie flies on there with a bait head. And my bait head of choice, I'm a big fan of the new hot fish head from Hot Fish Lures in Owen Sound, Ontario. Canadian guy. It's a fantastic head that, straight out of the box, just slide your meat strip in and go. No need for tuning. And it's a fantastic, really, really easy head to use, whether you're a beginner or someone very, very seasoned. But I'm a huge fan of running meat strips.
So sounds like that's an easy way to get started. We got a couple questions coming in. I'm going to answer this first one. It's from Matthew Davis. He's asking a fish hawk question. Can you use an X4D on an X4 transducer? Can I just change out the head units? Matthew, you can change out the head units. The deucer will work, but you will need a different probe. So the X4D probe is different from the X4 probe. So the transducer, if you've already got that in there, you can leave that, but the rest of it, you're going to have to change out the head and the probe if you want to go that way. But Captain John Pollock joined us last week, and he's from the Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin area. He asked the first question of the night, and I love this question. He wants to know, do Canadians believe in the banana superstition?
That's a good one. I think the answer is yes, but it depends who you are. So I was definitely one for the no bananas, and when I lived out west, like the captain I learned to fish out west with, and a lot of the different tactics, he was dead against it. And then last year, I always tell my customers, like, hey, no bananas, and it's a bit of a joke or a gimmick we laugh about. And there was one trip with a set of guys that have actually become my regulars. Like, I think they booked 4 trips with me last year, and this was on their first trip. And I've never said anything. I forgot. And then literally we went out. I think we hit a back-to-back double. It was 2 brothers and one of their girlfriends. So 3 of them on the boat. The 2 guys were fishing. We hit a double, got those in, hit another double, got those in. And one of the brothers, man, it was like, I'm so tired. I need a drink and I need something to eat. He grabs a bottle of water and pulls out a banana. And I was like, okay, bust.
It didn't seem to affect that trip, right?
No, not at all.
Just want to thank everybody watching us on YouTube as well tonight. We're live on YouTube for the first time for Fish Hawk Live, so on Facebook and YouTube this evening. Mike Bowers' question from Facebook here says, as a novice fisherman, where would you recommend to go for information to learn to fish the Great Lakes? Books, videos, charters, classes, etc. What would be the best approach in your opinion?
I think it depends on where you are. Like, from a books perspective, there's the Keating on Kings books. While I'm in Canada, American gentleman, but it's a great book. I know there's a series of different online courses that some people offer, but I tell you, and you mentioned it earlier, there is just so much knowledge now on YouTube. Like, I'm just one guy that has a channel. I know there's Russell, he's got his channel. There's just so many great channels out there. If you're willing to invest the time, it's a great way to learn. The other tip I recommend, and I was doing a seminar like this a few months ago with a bunch of captains from the Ontario Guides Association that I'm a member of. And one of the recommendations I do say is, and even how I learned when I moved out west, because the fishery was different, I booked a couple of charters with a captain and explained, hey, I've got my own boat. I'm new to the area. I'd love to learn. Are you game for taking me out, knowing that I want to learn and I want to eventually do this on my own boat? And this captain was totally cool with it. So that's another really good way to learn, and a really good way to grow your network is to, reach out to a couple of captains and, book some trips with them, and, you'll learn a ton.
Let's talk trips right now, Marc. Obviously, things in Ontario are a little bit different than they were, say, 10, 11 months ago. You guys are in a real serious lockdown right now. And tell me a little bit about what's going on right now up in Ontario in your neck of the woods when it comes to getting out on the water and actually doing some fishing.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are in a third wave of COVID right now, and we're in a province stay-at-home order. So it's definitely putting a damper on, call it the charter industry right now, as we're unable to operate at the current time. For myself in Toronto, our season typically starts, late May, early June at the earliest. So I'd say it's not terrible for myself personally yet, being that I run out of Toronto. That being said, and in most years, I will actually move my boat to the South Shore on the Canadian side in St. Catharines. And, I'll run the boat out of April and May out of St. Catharines. Last year, I didn't bother. I had a real good feeling it was going to happen, and we'd be locked down. So it's definitely impacted the charter industry. But in addition to that, because of the stay-at-home order, it's impacted. You can't. We've been asked not to interact with people outside of our households. In addition to that, the marinas have been asked. The marinas have been given permission to put boats in the water and prepare for the season, but they've been asked to make sure that there's no recreational use of their boats. So interesting time for us right now. But we're all staying positive, hoping that things turn around, and granted, people are safe, but also that we would get to have a season. It does feel like it's going to be a little bit delayed, which was exactly how it was last year. We by the time we got the go ahead last year, and things normalized, and then getting people to, like, my boat was stored off site last year, getting a trucking company to truck it down, and then getting it ready. I don't think I did my first trip until call it the July 1st, July 4th long weekend.
Yeah, so you guys put your boats in or start your season pretty late typically. How does that season progress? What's it like fishing in June? What are you targeting at that point, and what kind of strategies are you using in early summer out of bluffers?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, Chris, and that's why, like, often many of us would start our seasons on the South Shore, because it could be hit or miss in June. What I'd say in June out of bluffers, for me, it's predominantly a spoon program, and I find you're doing a lot of searching. The water is often still quite cool. I remember Junes where you've been out and it's been like 44 degrees on the surface, and you're 40 at best down 40 feet. So it's quite cool, and the warmer water still on the South Shore. So what I find is you're covering a lot of water. It's really, I call it recon a lot of June. That being said, if I think about last year or even the year before, what I found the last couple of years in June, at Bluffers, Bluffers is quite popular for everyone wanting to troll east-west, and is trolling with the land. What I find is nice about June, the boat traffic is much quieter, much lesser. And what I find I do in June, as I'm doing a lot of that searching, is I troll south. So I'll start my trolling around 100 feet of water, drop my kicker, and I'll troll south, and start to really pluck away at where I start to pick up fish, and then I'll focus on that area. But again, it's a spoon program. Typically if I'm running a trip, I'm going to have, for my boat, I usually do 4 or 5 people max. So on the Canadian side, we're allowed to run 2 rods per angler. So I'll have an 8 or 10 rod spread. I'm covering lots of water, running spoons, really trying to locate the fish. And when I do locate them, really stay on them, because the other thing that's really interesting about bluffers is we don't get the lake trout. So, if I was to fish out of St. Catharines or Grimsby, there's an abundance of lake trout. So when things are quiet with the salmon in the spring, you can go out and have a 30, 40, fish day. We don't get the lake trout at bluffers. We'll catch the odd one in call it, late May or June, but it's the odd lake trout. They really don't hang out in our water.
All right, so that's our June. What does it look like when things get hot? When's the best time to go out of that area as the summer rolls on?
July is awesome. Like, July is absolutely fantastic. I was just actually communicating with a bunch of other captains, because I was trying to arrange a 5-boat trip for one of my customers, and just even trying to find a date in July that we could line up 5 boats on a Friday was a chore, but we pulled it off. July is just a fantastic month. I can go back, if I just think about, my first year back when I moved back from British Columbia in 2015, I remember one day with my buddy and my dad just going out, and I just got back from British Columbia. It was our July long weekend. Canada Day is July 1st, like the Americans have July 4th. And I remember we were absolutely exhausted by 11 a.m. going out again in the water in front of bluffers, because we'd literally hit like 50 fish. So it can be, and for me coming back from Vancouver, which is known as, call it, West Coast being the mecca of salmon fishing. It was just one of those days that I will never forget. And I remember my buddy Alan just being absolutely exhausted from pulling in so many fish. So July can be absolutely incredible. What I would say with the water that I fish, it might as well be a congested highway in July, because the boat traffic is incredible. So while it can be really, really good fishing in July, it's not surprising to see the fishing be super hot and fire up and then just shut off. My belief is there's just so much boat traffic. They've had so much gear in front of them. They just really just shut down. And then that's when I hate to say it, that's when I think it separates the men from the boys, because you start to see the boats all scatter, and then it's starting to change up your tactics to entice those fish to bite. But yeah, absolutely. If someone wanted to fish the Toronto area that's never fished before, come see us in July.
All right. You say when things get tough, what do you do? I mean, what is your strategy when things start becoming difficult? The bite gets tough. What kind of tactics, what kind of changes, what kind of moves are you making?
The one thing I find, in Canada, whether it be on the West Coast, which is predominantly, like in the West Coast, it's all a downrigger bite. Now, granted, I think they've got a lot dirtier water because of a lot of the runoff. But on Lake Ontario and in Toronto especially, well, no, on the Canadian side, we still use a lot of downriggers. And you find a lot of boats that are recreational anglers, one or two guys. Their spread will be 2 downriggers and maybe 2 divers. And what I find is when the bite shuts down, what I've learned over the years, and especially as I've started to experiment more, running the trips, running more rods, is when they shut down, I don't think the fish are completely done. It's the downriggers turn off, is what I would say. So what I find is I'm stretching out my leads a lot more if I am going to still run downriggers. But for me, I start putting out a lot more junk lines, lead core, coppers, or I've got them on my setup. There's times where I'll pop a downrigger and I'll leave one rigger down with a rod. The other rigger's got my fish hawk probe, but I'm only running one rigger. Sometimes if I've only got a small trip with 2 people and myself, I can only run 6 rods. So like absolutely at those times, it'll be only one rigger. I'll run 2 divers, and then I'll have 3 junk lines out. And the one thing that I'd say I do, I'm a slide diver guy. Like, I think that makes a huge difference when those fish shut down, because I can put my bait as far as I want behind the diver or as close as I want to the diver. So that, I think that makes a difference. But I've noticed, when those fish shut down, my weighted steels, my lead cores, my slide divers stretch back. Those are the rods that'll fire typically. It's not my riggers.
Adam Christian, question from Facebook, wants to know how things are for cohos in your neck of the woods. He fishes the eastern basin of the lake. The cohos show up for 2 weeks, then run up the river. Sometimes they'll see them in early spring and then they're gone. So what's the coho fishing like out of Bluffers?
So, I'd say it can be quite good. They're actually, and I'm just looking because I've got some coho baits around here somewhere. It can be quite good. But what I'd say is most anglers here want nothing to do with them. They're not targeted very well. They're considered a bycatch for the most part. Everyone wants the king, right? They want the big Chinook. Now, part of that is we've got a couple of huge money tournaments with the Silver Salmon Challenge or the Great Ontario Salmon Derby that have monstrous prizes. But to answer the question, we get coho, and I'd say as a captain, typically my customers want Chinook. But there's times when the lake flips or the fishing is tough out in front. I'll move away again from that east-west troll and I'll start trolling south. And I can, we can get out to the blue zone where I'll be running, orange spin doctors or the baby spin doctors with a small like Twinkie fly on there, or a Dodger with a small fly, or just a spoon. simple spoon with like orange dots. Key is lots of orange. I'll go into the blue in the blue zone, and we'll get double digit days of steelhead and coho. So that we can have really, really good coho and steelhead trips. Typically, it's not in close to shore. I find it's that's that 6-7 miles out, but it's not that far for us. For us in Toronto, we can be out in 350 feet of water in I think about 7.5, 8 miles.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I wanted to ask you about steelhead in that neck of the woods as well. Brian, it was Brian who asked about the coho. What about steelhead out of there? What are you using to target steelhead in your area?
It's spoons and flies, like spoons and flies, and I would honestly say a lot of the time they're not super picky. For me, a couple of things I use. I mentioned I use the Hot Fish bait heads. Hot Fish also make flies and spoons, and they're a Canadian company. I like to support some of the local guys. What I love about their spoons, though, is they're a real thin spoon. They're thinner than your standard mag. And why I like these is even when sometimes the lake flips over, I'll go out deep looking to get those those steelhead or those coho and what people call the charter fish. But I'll still like to put a couple of rods down deep in that more stable water while it might be cold, a bit more stable, and run some meat on those. And what I love about these spoons is I control these spoons slower. So I control these spoons at 2.0, 2.2, 2.3, on my Fishhawk probe, and still entice the steelhead or the cohos. But I find for me for steelheads, I'm running the pinks. I'm running so this is a Wonder Bread with a UV and a glow. I'm running the orange, and those are mag size. I'll also use some of the smaller spoons. So this is probably one of my favorite steelhead spoons I have. It's a Stinger mixed veggies, but I brought a couple out here just to show they get absolutely mangled. There's no paint left on these from the steelheads. It works really, really well for me. So I'm finding it's a lot of the oranges, the pinks, and some of the multicolor I find is what I use a lot for the steelhead. Don't get me wrong, I've got a spoon here. This is a Hot Fish. I don't know what he calls it, but it's green chartreuse with a glow ladder. This has taken probably 100 steelhead. This is mangled, but I find it's all spoons when I'm fishing for steelhead. Don't even need to worry about definitely not meat and even flies while they work. Spoons are just so easy, and the steelhead are just happy to play.
I saw a lot of single hooks on those spoons that you were showing off, Mark, and that leads us into Brian Richardson's question. He says he's getting back into salmon and trout fishing on the Big Lake. Question is, when pulling spoons, do you like single or treble hook, and why?
Okay, so that I'm glad that question came up. So I'm going to start by saying I used to be, right from a kid when I was fishing in England with my dad, I was a treble hook guy. That's all I ever knew. And then in 2012, when I moved out west, I met a captain, Jason Tonelli, out there that runs. He owns a tackle shop, and he runs, I think it's 4 or 5 charter boats. And he introduced me to singles. And out west, the regs are really tight. So barbless hooks, number of points. There's a lot of different regs, and they ran singles. So I'd fish out there with singles because I had to. And then I'd come home and visit my family a couple of times a year. And of course, I made sure I came home during salmon season. So I'd go fish with my dad, and I'd bring gear home. And we'd use my gear, and we'd catch fish, and we'd land the fish. And I started noticing we were losing fish with the trebles. So my dad was like, no, trebles are better. Trebles are better. He'll laugh if he's watching this because he'll remember this conversation. So when I moved back, the first year I came back, it was kind of almost a bit of a fun competition with my dad and I. He had his Lake Ontario tackle, and I had all my stuff from out west. And so what I did was I took all the barbless hooks off because I didn't want to give myself too hard of a time. But I put on all new singles with barbs. And my dad and I kind of monitored it for the whole season. And at the end of the season, we realized that we were having far better hookup ratios with the singles. And we were landing the fish. So that's how I got into singles. So you notice yeah, you're absolutely right. All of my spoons have got singles. I think if I look around, I've probably got 1 or 2 with trebles, And those are probably just hooks. Those are probably spoons I bought mid-season and never really had time to change and just threw them in the water. In addition to that, though, Chris, and I'm just trying to find my, here's a meat rig. My meat rigs are all singles as well. You barely will find a treble hook on my boat. And I remember a couple of years ago being at the Lotsa show in Niagara and having a conversation with Pete Alex, and he was just telling me how he had recently started to convert a lot of his meat rigs over to the singles. I find it works. I got a buddy of mine that calls my single rigs the jaws of death when it comes to meat rigs, because you get one hook under the chin, one in the mouth, and the fish isn't going anywhere. The only downside is you're retying the rigs a lot. Like when I run two singles on a meat rig and I'm trying to get those hooks out of the fish's mouth, I'm often snapping off one of the hooks, and now that rig's garbage. So that's the only downside with it on the meat rigs, I'd say.
Yeah, but easier than pulling trebles out of nets and those kind of messes as well.
Absolutely.
So we got another question here. This one's from YouTube, and he asks, he knows you're a big Shimano guy. Why do you prefer the Streamsides over the Taloras?
You know what? For me, I started using the Streamsides. One of my buddies had them on his boat, and they were a great rod. I think the price point for the Streamsides is really good. They have a fulsome lineup. I like the action, and actually one of the things while I use Shimano for my reels, I'm a big Dakota fan. All my reels are 600, 700, or 800 Dakotas. I actually was never really a big Talora rod fan. I just really wasn't a fan of the action of the rods, especially on the diver. And the other thing is, there's a number of people have said this with the Talora. And I hate to say this, but with the Taloras, they're lead core copper rod. I'm not sure about the new ones, but I personally found the older ones, the guides did not hold up very well to weighted steel, and I'm a huge weighted steel fan. So that's another reason.
Let's unpack that a little bit, Marc. Why do you like weighted steel over something like a copper or lead core?
So I'll say I'm a big fan of lead core still. I do run a lot of lead core. But when it comes to call it that thicker copper or weighted steel, I converted to. I'd say I started using weighted steel probably 4 or 5 years ago with 1 or 2 rods because I had a bunch of coppers. But plain and simple, it's just a lot easier to work with. The bird's nesting of copper, and it's so soft. I find the weighted steel, it's just bulletproof. I don't have any issues with it kinking. I can start a weighted steel rod, letting it out, and hand it to a customer that's never fished before and say, "Hold this." I would never in a million years do that with a copper. So that's one of the reasons why I've flipped. I like the weighted steel. It works. It catches fish, and I find I have to replace it far less than I have to replace copper.
We've got about 15, 20 minutes left in the show here. So if someone has some more questions, put them in there. And again, the question of the evening is going to win a Fish Hawk swag package with a hat and some stickers and probably a couple other fun items that the guys will throw in there for you. So go ahead and drop those questions in if you have them. Let's get to a question here. Another one from Facebook. It's Ryan Bombach. He says, how is fishing the drop different from other ports on the North Shore or other parts of Lake Ontario, U.S. side, due to the sheer drop and the way the currents are created and move into that area? Yeah,
so I start by saying I haven't fished much on the American side, so I can't comment about the American side of Lake Ontario. I find that yes, there's definitely currents. There's definitely currents on the drop, but it brings the fish in, and you deal with the currents. Where I'd say there's a lot of current is while I'm at Bluffers, the drop runs call all the way in front of Toronto, so it also runs in front of Toronto Islands, and that right where the Toronto Islands are, you've also, if you look kind of right across to the the lake, you've got the Niagara River. So you do get some current that, actually comes all the way across the lake. So that's where I do find currents can get a little bit haywire is, in front of the Toronto Islands. For me, I'm watching my lines. Like I'm a firm believer, and this is something I used to be so important and got drilled into me when I was out west, where there was just a ton of current. If my lines aren't trolling nice and square behind the boat, I'm not happy. So if my lines are crabbing, that's where I'm looking to adjust my setup, because I'm a firm believer of if my lines aren't running true and square, my baits aren't working properly.
All right, here's one I think I'll have probably a quick answer from you. How is the brown trout fishing from the bluffs?
I'd say it's, for me, I'd say it's almost non-existent. And the reason I say that is, the water in the bluffs, it's barely fished in the spring, when a lot of the time people are focusing on brown trout. I'll tell you, my goal this spring was to actually get the boat in really early, and try to do a lot more exploring, working for brown trout, in the spring. But unfortunately, we're in lockdown right now. I can't do that. We've got, just east of Bluffers Park, we've got the Pickering nuclear plant, and it's got outflows that, there's typically some warm green water in front of that stretch east of Bluffers Park. Years and years and years ago, like when I was a kid, we would catch browns out there in the spring, but the water is not really fished anymore. So not fished anymore really in the spring. So I'm lucky if I catch one brown trout a year.
All right. Here's another one. This time we're talking about the fall. And he wants to know, do you fish close to bluffers for staging kings, or do you change ports in the fall?
So the short answer is it depends. We don't have a natural call it river by bluffers. We've got a great pen project that's run by Chris and the Metro East Anglers program. So great pen project. But with that, we find our fish actually come back quite late, and they're not there, and then the next minute they're jumping in the marina underneath my boat, literally where I'm docked. What I'd say though is east of the bluffers again. Like bluffers is a great port because there's a lot of water we can cover. East of us, there's the Rouge River and Duffins Creek and Highland Creek. So there's definitely some natural runs there. But I'd say for me, if I truly want staging fish, I'll fly over to Port Credit, which is probably a 40 minute boat ride. Or, depending on some years, I may take the boat and early September. That's a tournament over in St. Catharines. It's the King of the Lake tournament. I'll often compete in that tournament. So I'll take the boat over and I'll leave the boat over there. That being said, though, we can have some really awesome Septembers fishing in bluffs. It's almost like once the big fish are gone, the 2-year-olds come out to play. And we'll often get, an abundance of 2-year-olds at the drop that, when I'm fishing with charters, they love. They're more than happy to play all day on 2-year-old fish. I'll often lighten up the tackle, put out some lighter downrigger rods and have a ton of fun. The other thing is, we'll have a great offshore bite all the way through September. So last September, I'd originally planned to go out to the South Shore. And then I made the call and said, you know what, I have a feeling I'm not going to get a spring, so I'm going to leave the boat at Bluffers. And I ended up, I was fully booked in September, or even to the first weekend of October with charters every weekend. We did have some rough weather and had to cancel, but had fantastic trips where I'd start in like 200 feet of water and just troll straight south and looking for the fish and when they'd hit, and then circling those areas. And we had a number of double-digit days fishing for, call it juvenile kings and steelhead.
All right, here's one from YouTube. Says he's getting new Canon downrigger weights this year. Pancakes or balls?
So I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. So I would say, I'd say if I had to pick one of those, I'd probably pick a cannonball. Just because I think the cannonball, my personal opinion is I think the cannonballs get pushed less side to side by the currents. Myself, though, I'm going to stand up to grab one. I use the POW casting weights. So they're like a fish weight. They got dimples on them. I'm a big fan of these. These are 16 pounders. But before that, like when I was in BC, I could have used either balls or pancakes, and I used to use cannonballs out there. And then before I was running, call it the fish type weights, I was a ball guy.
All right. Here's another downrigger question. Braided line versus steel for the rigger. Does the noise coming off the rigger line affect fishing?
I think that just depends on who you ask. I think everyone's got a personal preference for that. I think there's pros and cons. There's some people that believe the buzz helps attract the fish and that salmon are aggressive, and I think that's partially right. But then there's also times when salmon get spooked too. There's the whole belief that your downriggers can emit bad currents from your boats, and that by running braid, you don't have that problem. The one thing I'll say about braid is it's very finicky. My dad and I had a friend of ours that he got a couple of new riggers, and he was adamant he was going with braid. Let's just say, Chris, he made your company a bunch of money because I think he lost 3 probes because he snapped off the braid. With not stopping his riggers properly, or hitting the button again and not realizing that it was already to the top. So braid can be finicky. In addition, I had a buddy of mine. That swears by braid. He is a super experienced angler, but one day on the troll, a boat came really, really close, way closer than they should have. With a fish on. It was a wire diver, and literally sliced his both lines, lost 2 weights, lost a probe. Right, so braid can be awesome, but it's finicky. It's not for the faint at heart. I personally, for that reason, I run wire. Like I got a lot going on the boat. I'm running a boat with typically 4 or 5 people. I don't have a mate on the boat. It's one less thing for me to worry about.
All right, here's a great question. I like this one. What's the best tip, trick, or tactic that you've brought home from out west?
For me, it's running the anchovy. I had never ran an anchovy like this before. This is a fake one, but I get real ones. I had never ran an anchovy before until I went out west, and they work. They work extremely well. There was I run both. Like I run strip bait and I run anchovies. There was a period of time last year where I was like, it felt like it was like 3 or 4 to 1 running an anchovy versus running a strip bait. So that would be my biggest thing. It takes a while to learn because you're having it's not like a bait head where you put your meat strip in and it's got a curve and it forces it to roll. With the anchovy, you're actually having you're putting the hook in the back tail of the anchovy. You're creating that curve for it to spin. So it's a bit of getting used to, but that would be the number one thing for me.
So they're terrible on pizza, but great on the end of your line.
I agree.
All right. Here's a good one. I like this one too. Can you talk terminal end of your weighted steel? What pound test are you using for leaders? What length are you running? And do you change when running spoons versus flashes and flies?
So yes, when it comes to using flashes and flies, absolutely. Versus spoons. What I would say, for me, how I've kind of got mine rigged out is my weighted steels I predominantly use with flasher flies and with meat. When I'm running them with meat, typically I'll run them with a smaller paddle because I want to keep the buoyancy of it to a minimum. I find if I run too big of a paddle, I'm worried about it being too buoyant. I'll typically run a 30-pound leader when I'm running the weighted steel. I do have a couple of shorter core steels, so like 100 and 150. On those ones, I knock it down to 20-pound because those I'm running with a spoon. But that's what I do. The other thing I like to do when I'm running my weighted steel, while my backer's typically like a 50 or 60-pound braid. But what I do is when I terminate between the braid backer and the weighted steel, I'll put a piece of typically 150 to 180, 200 pound braid in between, probably about 24 inches. And why I do that is that's what I like to clip my, whether my inline board, my stern planer, or my big board to. And why I do that is I find it wears the braid less. But the other thing I find with weighted steel is so strong. I find it can sometimes actually break the backer. So I've found by running that thicker braid in between, it just holds up so much better, especially if you've got a real big fish on there. And let's say someone starts playing with your drag and it's a little bit too tight.
All right, very good. Here's a question. Want to know, you're talking about a little bit there, what you believe the sink rate on a weighted steel versus copper is. He said he's heard very different numbers.
I think my general rule of thumb. So for me, when I fully jumped in with both feet, going from copper to weighted steel, what I did is, so my 200 copper, I replaced with a 250 steel. My 300 copper, I replaced with a 350 steel. You can see a bit of a theme here. So I find myself, I'm in that kind of like that 20 to 22 feet per 100 range, whereas I found copper was more in like that 25 range myself. So I've just bumped it up an extra 50 feet. It might now, those rods might run a few feet deeper now, but I've had tons of success with what I've done there. So I stick with it. I'm a process guy. So like I like to have things very similar, follow a process. So that's how I made the transition from weighted steel to from copper to weighted steel.
Marc, when people think about your area, I think they think a lot about big kings. I think they think about the salmon derby and that type of stuff. How does your strategy change when it comes from maybe we're going to go out and try to catch some fish and get some excitement and let the clients have a good time to we're going after derby fish? What does that derby fish strategy look like?
It's funny you say that because that's actually one of the biggest debates that is, and I'd say is partially going on right now around, charters and catching big kings. Don't get me wrong. We love to get our customers on big fish, but when we're running a charter, it's not about big fish. It's about catching lots of fish. Our charters are typically 4 or 5. Some of my colleagues out there, they're running 6, 7 person trips, larger boats. We need to get lots of numbers. So, we're often not looking for those big kings. We're looking for numbers. We're running large spreads. We want kings, coho, a steelhead. We're happy because we want to see smiles on faces of people catching fish. So it's a big debate right now with all the big derbies, like, oh, do the charters win them all? And it's actually, if you go back and look at the history, typically the charters don't, because we're trying to find lots of fish. To answer your question though, when it comes to the big fish, I find when I'm looking for big fish, I'm slowing the troll down. I'm not running spoons typically. That's when I've gone to I'm going to a predominantly a meat program. It's a slower troll meat program. Often that's where I'm running. It's later season. I'm running more shallower water, and I'm happy to not get lots of bites. I'm looking for that big bite. Like that's the biggest difference I find. It's and sometimes then it's actually less is more. Like it's I'm not running lots of rods. I'm running less rods. I'm trying to keep the noise and the distraction out of the water. There's been a number of times, whether it be on my boat or some of my buddies' boats, catching derby fish when literally we're packing up for a trip and we're down to our 1 or 2 rods, and next thing you know, it rips off. Or I think back on on our boat, it was probably, I think it was 3 years ago. I was working at my day job, and I'd been fishing for like 5 days prior straight with my dad, and we'd been running some trips and stuff. And my dad was meant to go to work, and he owned his own business. He's now retired. He was like, "Screw this, I'm going fishing." He got out at like 8:30 in the morning, threw it a couple of rods, and there comes his derby fish. But he was only running 2 rods on his own. So to me, it's a slower. I find it's a slower meat troll. Less is more kind of approach for big fish.
Well, speaking of speed, here's a question. Wants to know what your typical trolling speed at the ball is on your probe for running salmon spoons.
So that's an interesting question. Earlier, I run a very thin spoon. I wish I could show you that how thin and light these spoons are. Like, they're like these spoons are similar to like a stingray on thickness, and they're really light. So for me, I'll run those like I do with meat, running 1.9 to 2.0, 2.1, 2.2. Like that's my range. If I'm running and I don't, I might have one here. I got a carbon 14 typical regular mag here. This spoon I'll be running, a heavier spoon, I'd run that at 2.5, 2.7. But if I try and run those lightweight spoons at that speed, they'll just spin. But I like to mix things up. I like to have the buffet out there, so I'm running the lighter spoon so it doesn't screw around with my meat program. And then when it comes to flies, I can just shorten the leader because of the speed I'm running.
Things up. There's another thing that you like to do, and you wanted to talk a little bit about it. So, custom painting. Tell me a little bit about your custom paint work that you're doing on your own stuff.
Yeah, you know what? It's I'm not an ice fisherman or a hunter, so I'm devoted to salmon fishing, and call it only salmon fishing. It's it's probably all my wife can take too, is me having the one hobby. So in the off season, I love to paint my own gear. For me, I found it started out where I just couldn't find some of the stuff I wanted, and it became a bit of an addiction. So like I have, as you can see behind me, I've got way too much gear, and this is only part of it. The whole floor here is covered with stuff right now. I've taken over the basement, but I started out with a couple of different airbrushes, couple of tapes, figuring it out, and from there, I really now I've really started to venture into lots of custom tackle. In the winter I do make a lot of tackle for myself, but actually, if I think about this winter, I've really made nothing for myself so far because I've been making it for a lot of other people. So I do make a lot of custom stuff for other captains and other tournament anglers. That's unique and different for themselves, and obviously with me promising not to share their secret patterns with other people. But it's just another way to extend my hobby. And I've learned to airbrush, and a lot of trial and error, because not every paint works well when it comes to doing custom tackle and holding up, and not every clear coat, especially clear coat, holds up. Like that's probably one of the biggest challenges. In a perfect world, you can get access to an automotive clear coat super easily. That's been one of the biggest challenges as I've learned to custom paint. I'm fortunate I've got some people I know that actually work at body shops or own body shops, so I can bulk up and say, okay, here's 50, here's 100 flashers, can you clear them for me? But I find it a lot of fun in the downtime, and I can experiment with different colors, different patterns. For example, one of the staple flashers on Lake Ontario was always, at least on the Canadian side, was white lightning, and great paddle. But now, and I'm just trying to look at what I got here, I've got a white lightning on an 8-inch Pro Troll. I got a white lightning on a Spin Doctor. So I love the fact that you can I can make whatever I want that may not be available in a particular pattern. Or if I think about this, like I got one of the legendary, I think this is the legendary products with the adjust. Can't really buy these anymore, but I got a few of these, and custom painted them in a black and green dot. So that's where I find I like to I'll see certain patterns working on one particular flasher, and I'll kind of port it over to another flasher.
Well, Marc, I really appreciate you spending so much time with us tonight, and it was really fun to talk to you and have you share some of the knowledge that you have. I think you did an awesome job tonight answering people's questions. If people want to find out more about you and Kings Landing Sport Fishing, what's the best way for them to do so?
So I'd say a couple of things. You mentioned my YouTube channel. So if anyone just goes to Google and types in Kings Landing Sport Fishing YouTube, my channel will pop up. In addition to that, I've got my website. So kingslandingsportfishing.com is my website. They can find out about me and my charter business there. If they want to get out and do a trip, they can call me. But actually, I've got a new service now on the website that it's got my full schedule up to date. they can literally click on the link and they can book me on the spot, like instant books. So that's something new for this year that's working out really well as well. In addition, they can also find me Kings Landing Sport Fishing on Facebook. They can look me up on Facebook. I'm a super friendly guy. Like, you know, I get people asking me questions all the time through Facebook Messenger, and I'm happy to help and love to chat. And I also learn a lot from the people that reach out. So that's great.
Very cool, Marc. Thanks again so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you being on. And again, come out and check out Marc's YouTube channel. And today's winner question of the night goes to Marc Holiday. So, Marc, go ahead and drop your shipping information to us in the inbox there. Send us a private message, and we will get that out to you either tomorrow or Friday. But thanks again, everybody, for coming out and checking out Fishhawk Live tonight. Next week, we're going to be talking the Niagara Bar. We've got a really cool guest coming on to talk about that. So we'll see you then. For Marc Kulak, I'm Chris Larson. Thanks so much for watching.
See you later, Owen.